The morning was quiet, but something didn't feel right. Inside Kensington Palace, the soft sun came through the tall windows and touched everything with golden light. But the air was heavy, like it knew something big was about to happen. Catherine stood still in the doorway, wearing her soft silk robe. She watched William getting ready in silence. Her heart was full, but her eyes stayed calm. After all these years, she knew when something was wrong. Deeply, silently wrong. William stood in front of the mirror, carefully putting on his navy uniform. His hands moved slowly and his eyes looked tired. He adjusted his medals one by one, but he wasn't really seeing them. On the table next to him was a photo of their family: Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis, all smiling. William looked at the photo for a long time, longer than usual. Catherine saw it. She noticed everything. That's how deep their love was. They didn't need to speak to understand each other. Today wasn't like other days. This wasn't just another royal duty or event. It was different, it was serious, it was painful. The silence between them said more than words ever could. Catherine felt something rising in her chest, something heavy, but she didn't let it show. She just stood there, still and strong, watching the man she loved prepare to leave her. 3 days earlier, everything had been normal. They were having breakfast with the children. George was excitedly talking about his cricket match at school. Charlotte was correcting his grammar in a funny voice. Louis was asking if dogs could become kings. Catherine and William laughed. It was a happy morning, a normal family moment. But then everything changed in just 1 second. William's private secretary walked into the room with a serious face. He held a white envelope sealed with the royal mark. William opened it quickly. His eyes scanned the words. His face changed. Catherine saw it right away. He didn't speak at first. Then he said the words that made the whole room go silent. "I have to leave. It's for the country. I don't know how long." Catherine didn't panic. She stayed calm, asking the right questions about safety, communication, how long he'd be gone. But inside, her heart broke. She smiled for the children, but her hands shook when she poured tea. She waited until that evening to cry when they were alone in the palace garden. They walked under the rose trees. The air smelled sweet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a countdown had begun. Catherine's voice was small when she finally asked, "How long?" William didn't lie. He didn't promise something he couldn't keep. He looked at her, held her hand, and said, "I don't know, but I promise, every day away from you will feel like a year." That night, they held each other longer than usual. Catherine didn't sleep. She watched him breathing. She listened to the high sounds of the palace, and she memorized the way his arms felt around her. The next evening, they told the children. They sat together in their private living room, where they always felt safe. George sat upright, like he was already preparing to be a king. Charlotte held her mother's hand tightly. Louis climbed into William's lap and didn't let go. William spoke slowly, clearly. He told them he had to go for something important, something that helped people. He told them he would come back, but he didn't know when. George nodded bravely. Charlotte cried, but wiped her tears quickly. Louis didn't say a word. He just held on to his father like he knew something deep inside his small heart. They spent that night making memories. They laughed. They played board games. Charlotte made hot chocolate. George asked for a bedtime story even though he was too old for them. Louis drew a picture of the family, holding hands, smiling. William folded the drawing and placed it in his coat pocket. Now, the day had come. Catherine stood in the doorway, watching William get ready. His hands moved with purpose, but there was something fragile about him today. He looked strong, but only because he had to be. Catherine's heart felt like it was wrapped in ice. She didn't cry. Not yet. Not while he was watching. She wanted him to feel strong. She wanted him to believe she would be okay. But inside, she was falling apart. William turned and saw her. The way she stood in the light, her brown hair soft around her face, her green eyes filled with emotion. He tried to remember every detail. He wanted to carry that image with him. Because what he was about to do wasn't just a mission. It was a goodbye. And it was the quiet kind of goodbye. The kind that didn't need a single word. The kind that was almost too painful to watch. It felt like the whole palace was holding its breath. Every room, every hallway, every corner seemed quieter than usual. The staff spoke in soft voices. The sound of footsteps echoed gently through the stone floors. It was as if everyone understood what was happening. This was not just another royal duty. It was a goodbye. A quiet, aching, personal goodbye. Catherine stood in the bedroom, still watching William. He was ready now. His uniform was perfect. His medals were shining. But his eyes were full of sadness. He looked at her, and it was like the years fell away. He didn't see the queen in waiting or the mother of his children. He saw the girl he met at university, the girl who laughed at his jokes and walked beside him in the rain, the girl who had become his entire world. She took a small step toward him, her bare feet cold on the floor. He reached out without thinking, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. That simple touch made her eyes water. She looked down quickly, blinking, the tears away. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "I already know." And she did. She knew the weight on his shoulders. She knew the duty he felt to his country, to his family, to the crown. She had seen it growing inside him for years, but knowing didn't make it hurt any less. William opened his mouth to speak but closed it again. He didn't trust his voice. His throat was tight. Instead, he took her hand and brought it to his chest. Her palm rested over his heart. It was beating fast, strong but uneven. She felt it. She would never forget that rhythm. It was the same heart that beat beside hers through all the years, through joy and sorrow, through births and losses, through everything. They had faced many things together: paparazzi, pressure, rumors, expectations. But this felt different. This felt final, like a pause in the middle of their story where the next page was blank. Catherine leaned her head gently on his shoulder, and for a moment they just stood there. No one moved. No one spoke. Their breathing was the only sound, in the room. Then came the knock. Soft at first, then again. A reminder that time was slipping away. William pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" he asked, barely louder than a whisper. She nodded. "I have to be," she said. "For the children. For you." He looked down, eyes glistening. "They'll miss me." "They already do," she said softly. William thought of George's brave little face that morning, pretending not to cry. He remembered Charlotte handing him a small photo and whispering, "Keep this with you." And Louis, little Louis, hugging his leg tightly, not letting go. Catherine had helped them all stay strong. She had smiled for them, made their breakfast, kept the morning routine the same. She had packed their school bags, kissed their foreheads, and waved them off with calm in her voice, even though her heart was breaking inside. Now she would do the same for him. She reached over to the side table and picked up a folded piece of paper. "Open it later," she said, placing it in his hand. "When you feel far from home." He didn't ask what it was. He simply nodded and put it in his jacket pocket next to the drawing from Louis and the photo from Charlotte. A little collection of love, folded and hidden close to his heart. They walked slowly down the stairs together. Every step felt like a goodbye. Catherine's fingers were still laced through his, and she held on tight, like she could stop time just by holding his hand. The butler stood quietly by the front door. The black car was waiting outside. William's security detail was already in position. Everything was moving forward, but inside the palace, time felt frozen. At the doorway, William stopped. He turned to look at her one last time. Her face was soft with love, but her eyes were full of strength. The tears were still there, but she didn't let them fall. She wouldn't. Not yet. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead again. Slowly. Tenderly. Like he was trying to leave a part of himself with her. She closed her eyes and let the moment sink into her memory. Then he let go of her hand. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He stepped outside into the cool morning air. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that echoed louder than any sound. Catherine didn't move. She stood there, alone now, the silence wrapping around her like a blanket of sorrow. She looked at the spot where he had just been. Her chest hurt with the emptiness. She touched her lips, still warm from his kiss. Then she walked back inside, slowly, her steps soft against the floor. She didn't cry. Not yet. But deep inside, her heart whispered the truth. This goodbye was the kind that stayed with you, the kind that made you count every heartbeat, the kind that made silence feel louder than words, and it was almost too painful to watch. The first night without William felt longer than any night Catherine had ever known. The palace was quiet, too quiet. Even the sound of the clock ticking in the hallway felt louder than usual. She lay in their big bed, alone, staring at the ceiling. The sheets beside her were still warm from the morning. She could still smell his cologne on the pillow. But he was gone. And every second without him hurt in a way that was deep and silent. Earlier that evening, after William had left, she had helped the children with their homework. She smiled and laughed when needed. She told Louis a bedtime story. She braided Charlotte's hair. She reminded George to feed the dog. She stayed busy, like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had changed. When the children were asleep, Catherine walked out into the garden. The night air was cool and the roses were closed, resting. She looked up at the stars and whispered a prayer for William's safety, a prayer for strength, a prayer to keep her family whole. Inside on William's desk sat the family photo he had left behind by accident. She picked it up and pressed it to her chest. It made her cry finally. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that slipped down her face like a broken river. She didn't want the children to hear. She wanted to be their strength. But tonight she allowed herself this small moment of sorrow. The next morning the palace began its usual rhythm. Staff moved around, breakfast was prepared, schedules were discussed. But for Catherine, everything was slower. Everything reminded her of William. His empty chair at the breakfast table, his untouched coffee cup, his missing laugh. George noticed first. "Mom," he said gently, "did you sleep at all?" She looked at him and smiled softly. "A little," she said. "Enough to dream." Charlotte gave her a drawing she made during the night. It showed their family, but this time William had angel wings. Catherine held back her tears and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Daddy is brave," Charlotte said. "He's a real hero." Catherine nodded. "He is, and so are you." Later that day, Catherine found the note William had tucked inside her robe pocket without her noticing. It was folded small and had only a few words, written in his careful hand. "Every second away from you is a second too long. I'll come home. I promise." She held the paper to her lips and closed her eyes. She could hear his voice in her head. She could feel his warmth. That note gave her strength to stand tall for another day. In the afternoon, she met with her charity team for a video call. She smiled for the camera, nodded at the updates, gave warm encouragement. No one saw the sadness behind her eyes. She had learned long ago that being royal meant wearing a calm face even when your heart was aching. And today, her heart was more fragile than ever. When the call ended, she sat alone in the library. She ran her fingers over the spine of William's favorite history book. She remembered how he used to read parts of it out loud in a dramatic voice just to make her laugh. She remembered their late-night talks, their quiet jokes, their shared dreams. It felt like all of it had paused, and she didn't know when it would start again. That evening, she received a short, coded message through official channels. It simply said safe, strong, thinking of you all. It was William. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Her hands shook as she read it. She read it again and again. She smiled through her tears. He was safe. That was all that mattered. At bedtime, Louis crawled into her lap. "When's Daddy coming back?" he asked in a small voice. Catherine stroked his hair and said gently, "When the stars miss him too much, they'll send him back." Louis looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Then I hope the stars miss him soon." Catherine kissed him and held him tight. She wished she could promise him a date, a time, something certain, but all she had was love and the strength to keep going. William had gone to serve his country, and she would serve in her own way, by keeping their home full of love and peace. That night, she lit a candle by the window. It was something quiet, something soft, a way to say, "We're here, we're waiting." The candlelight flickered, gentle and warm, just like her love for William. She sat by the window with her journal and began to write. A letter to William, a way to keep their connection alive. "Dear William, today was hard, but I was strong. For the children, for you, for us. The house feels emptier without you, but our love fills the spaces. I miss you more than I can say, but I'm proud of you. I'll write every day. Come home safe. Yours forever, Catherine." As she folded the letter and placed it in her drawer, she felt a little lighter. Their goodbye had been quiet, but their love was louder than words. The days turned into weeks, and still, the quiet inside Kensington Palace never truly lifted. Catherine moved through her days with grace, but something inside her felt missing. Every room she walked into reminded her of William. The soft sound of his laugh, the way he placed his shoes near the fireplace. Even the space beside her in bed seemed to echo at night, but she never allowed the children to see her sadness. Every morning, she woke before them. She dressed carefully. She smiled through breakfast. She helped George with homework, listened to Charlotte's piano practice, and played pretend games with Louis in the nursery. She told stories at night and always ended with the same words, "Daddy loves you, and he's coming back." Still, her heart ached. Every evening after the children went to sleep, Catherine sat by the window with her candle burning. The light stayed on just in case William could somehow see it, somehow feel it. It became a symbol, a promise, a silent message that he was missed, remembered, and deeply loved. Then one morning, something changed. It was a normal day, cloudy and cool. Catherine was in the garden with the children, helping Louis plant tulip bulbs. Suddenly, one of the royal guards approached. He handed her a small folded paper. Catherine took it calmly, but inside she felt her heart begin to race. It had been days since the last message. She opened it with careful hands. "Returning home. Soon." Only 3 words. But those words made her world shift. The paper trembled in her hands as her eyes filled with quiet tears. She blinked them, away quickly before the children noticed. She stood up slowly, looking at the cloudy sky. It felt brighter somehow. The roses around her seemed to lift their heads. She knew it wasn't over yet, but something inside her whispered that the waiting would end soon. Over the next few days, she cleaned and organized William's study. She placed Charlotte's photo on the desk again. She added Louis's newest drawing, one where their family was holding hands under a rainbow. She even ironed his favorite navy blue sweater and placed it neatly on the chair beside the fireplace, just in case he wanted to wear it when he came home. Then the day arrived. It was quiet again, like it had been on the morning he left. But this time the silence was different. It wasn't heavy, it was full of waiting. The staff moved with purpose. George wore his best blazer. Charlotte carried a small bouquet of white roses. Louis kept looking out the window every 5 seconds, and Catherine stood in the same spot where she had said goodbye. Near the grand window, the soft light on her face. Her hands were folded tightly in front of her, her heart beating faster than it had in weeks. Then they heard it. the sound of a car door opening. Catherine froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly and walked toward the front doors. She didn't run. She didn't rush. But her steps were quick, full of hope. And then she saw him. William stepped out of the black car, dressed in simple clothes, his face tired but filled with light. His eyes searched the doorway. Then he saw her. For a long second, they didn't move. The space between them felt like forever. Then, slowly, William walked toward her. His steps were careful, almost unsure. Catherine stepped forward too. And then, without words, they embraced. She held him tightly, her head resting against his chest. His arms wrapped around her like they never wanted to let go. His coat smelled, like wind and dust, but it also smelled like home. William whispered, "I'm home." And that was all she needed to hear. The children came running next. George hugged his father tightly. Charlotte gave him the bouquet and said proudly, "We never stopped believing." Louis showed him a new drawing and said, "You can put this one in your pocket too." William looked at each of them with love too deep for words. His family, his heart, still here, still whole. That night, they all sat together in the living room. No cameras, no duties. Just a fire burning, warm and soft. William sat beside Catherine, their fingers laced. He looked at her and said, "You were my strength." She smiled and said softly, "And you were my reason." As the candle still burned quietly in the window, they knew something special had happened. Their goodbye had been painful. Their days apart had been long. But their love had carried them through. Not with big speeches, not with grand moments, but with quiet strength, steady hope, and the kind of love that never fades. And now, in that warm silence between them, they were home again, together.